Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam and this is part 2 of my romance recommendations where I am recommending romance books based on different tropes. I asked and y'all answered and we are doing enemies to lovers this time, which is one of my absolute favorite tropes. So I'm so excited for this, and I actually had a really hard time kind of like narrowing down, especially because this is such a popular trope. So I have 9 recommendations today and it's gonna take a minute, so let's get into it. Before we get into the actual books, if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the little bell icon will notify you when I post. I post on Sundays and Thursdays. Let's talk enemies to lovers. So as I've said, this is one of my absolute favorite romance tropes, especially in non-contemporary romance books, like anything with like a fantasy, sci-fi, paranormal romance element. So I have them broken up into kind of different genres. I have contemporary romance and fantasy, and then I have the contemporary romance kind of broken down a little bit from there. But let's go ahead and get started. The first book is Surviving Adam Mead. This is by Shannon Clare, and it is a young adult contemporary romance that follows 17-year-old Claire, and she is the daughter of the football coach at her high school, and she meets Adam Mead. That was obvious. She meets Adam Mead and he is one of the football players, and they absolutely cannot stand each other at first, but obviously that changes and the story goes from there. There's not really a whole lot to say about it. It is very, very short. It is only like 240 pages. It's very YA, very innocent, very clean, very cute. If you like YA enemies to lovers, you'll definitely like this. Next up, I have The Unhoneymooners. This is by Christina Lauren, and it follows our main characters, Olive and Ethan, and they are these siblings of 2 people that are getting married, and they are also the maid of honor and the best man. But something goes very wrong at the wedding. Everybody ends up with food poisoning except for these 2, and they end up being pretty much forced to go on this all-inclusive, already paid for honeymoon that the bride and groom could no longer use. But they absolutely hate each other, and now they have to pretend that they are married in Hawaii for a week. It's super fun. Absolutely loved it. If you like fake dating, that's exactly what this is, but with a very much enemies to lovers kind of thing going on here, and I love it. Next up, we have The Spanish Love Deception. This is by Elena Armas, and it follows our main character, Catalina, and she needs a date for her sister's wedding, and this guy at work offers to be her date, but she absolutely hates him, thinks he hates her, and does not want to go with him, but she is running out of options, so she ends up deciding to take him with her. So we've got kind of another fake dating situation, but also the enemies to lovers with some workplace drama added in here, and it's really fun. Next up, we have The Hating Game. This is by Sally Thorne, and it is very similar to The Spanish Love Deception. We have Lucy and Josh, and they work together and they hate each other, and it just drives Lucy crazy that Josh is so mean to her, and so it makes her absolutely hate him. She is such a bubbly, fun person, and they are now both competing for the same promotion, and things kind of spiral from there. We do get a tiny little bit of fake dating thrown in somewhere here. It's pretty fun. Alright, now in a little bit towards the darker side of contemporary romance, we have Bully, and this is by Penelope Douglas, and it follows our main character. Actually her name's not on the back, so I don't actually know what her name is, but she had a best friend and then something happened and he turned into a huge bully, and she ended up like leaving for a year. I think they're in high school. She like left for a year to avoid him, but now she's back and she decides to fight back, and I guess things spiral from there. I actually haven't read this one yet, but it is very high up on my TBR. I'm really, really excited to read it, and I definitely get like the enemies to lovers, but also like a friends to enemies to lovers, which I also love. Next up, we have Enemy by Tijan. So this follows our main character, Dusty, and she has just transferred to a Texas university where an old friend of hers, Stone Reeves, is a major football player. He's like really famous. I don't think he actually goes to the university. I think he's a pro football player in the same city, I think. But they keep running into each other. They hate each other, and she doesn't really understand why he hates her so much. They used to be neighbors. They used to be kind of friends, but something changed, and so we've got kind of another like friends to enemies to lovers kind of situation. I really, really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. It was super fun. I read it in one sitting. Absolutely loved it. Okay, then on the fantasy side of things, we're going to start with The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. This one's super, super popular, but this follows our main character, Jude. And she is she was basically kidnapped by fairies and has grown up in like the world of fairies, and she is ruthlessly bullied by the fairy prince and he hates her. That's no secret at all, but she is a very ambitious person and she is determined to kind of like take over fairy. So yeah, we get like definitely the fantasy elements, definitely an enemies to lovers kind of thing. I would say that this is more of a fantasy with an intricate romance side plot, but I went in after reading A Court of Thorns and Roses and expecting that level of romance, and I wouldn't say it's quite there, but I would say that it's still a fantasy romance with a little less on the romance if you're expecting something like ACOTAR, but still a really great romance, still for sure enemies to lovers, and one of the most satisfying slow burns ever. Next up, we have The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen, and this follows our main character, Lara, and she basically has been trained her whole life to be in an arranged marriage to the king of the Bridge Kingdom, but she's actually secretly been training to assassinate him. So she is now getting ready to marry him and has to carry out her plan to kill him, and it spirals from there. This is a duology. It is super fun. I really loved the series, and also the book is like one of the prettiest books I've ever seen. Like it's gorgeous. It's so high quality and I just love everything about it. It also has like really pretty art, and I just really love everything about this book. Like each chapter has really pretty pictures in front of it, and it's just like you can tell a lot of love went into like creating the physical product of this. Alright, and then my last fantasy book is The Shadows Between Us. This is by Trisha Levenseller, and it follows our main character, Alessandra. And basically, Alessandra lives in a fantasy world, and she has 3 main goals. She is going to make the Shadow King fall in love with her, steal his crown, kill him, and then steal his crown. That's her whole plan. However, she's not the only person trying to kill him, so she finds herself trying to keep him alive long enough to carry out her plan. And while she's busy keeping him alive and plotting to murder him, she finds out he might not actually be as bad as she thought. This one is a standalone, and it is so well done for a fantasy standalone. I feel like fantasy standalones are hard to pull off, and I think Trisha Levenseller hits it every single time, so would highly recommend this one. So those are all of my enemies to lovers recommendations. If you have a request for what my next romance trope video recommendations should be, let me know in the comments. I am absolutely happy to come up with any kind of trope you want, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!